So today I want to actually share something I put together via visual aids. So if you guys are followers of the channel, you know that over time I love to put together visual aids in a way to try to articulate my thoughts and put it on paper so people can actually understand and see what I'm talking about when I'm referencing certain things. But so today, as you can tell from today's title, it's going to be about $1 million nest egg. And so what I've noticed as of recently, especially this year, that the whole retirement / savings, conventional financial advice information is still being promoted heavily now. And I want to bring to your attention some things that most people may not position in front of you. And as I've always mentioned before, it's just a matter of time before and as monetary and fiscal policy continue to collide, that will cause a lot of problems for our current way of thinking when it comes to investing and preparing for, quote unquote, the ideal retirement. So one of the things that always has bothered me is the idea that we're told to set aside funds for a rainy day or for in a nest egg that's supposed to grow through compound interest throughout time, but yet they never really cover the side effects, rather, of our current monetary system, especially since the Great Recession. And so today I have a visual aid I want to share with you guys. And as always, you guys can find the link down below for this, because I want to definitely put something in your hands so you can see directly. But more importantly, as you see here, I have a variety of things on here, and I won't be able to get to everything in a short amount of time. So definitely make sure you guys come back, because I'm going to do more as I dive deeper into this. But yet on this very surface, the very topic for today is on the whole idea of $1 million and how $1 million today is not what $1 million used to be, as I'm going to show to you in a minute. But more importantly, $1 million as just having as a comfortable number to put in your mind as something that can last for a long period of time is not going to be the same way in the days ahead. And that has a lot to do with most people, majority of people for the most part, not understanding how monetary and fiscal policy, how they work in tandem to more so rob and to devalue anything that's been left stagnant for over a long period of time, like having funds in an account that doesn't really do much for you in the form of investing and whatnot. But this video here is solely going to be on just using this number right here, $1 million, and giving you a time frame if we were to go backwards into time as far as what would have been ideal for people to set aside to have one day for retirement or something of that nature. And so here I have a variety of things I overlaid just to try to highlight even more so my point of the idea that $1 million today, as I'm sure you can imagine, doesn't go as far as it used to back in the day. And I'm actually going to prove that. And so I actually came up with these numbers here and this little time frame that you guys can see here, basically by just reverse engineering the whole inflation calculator aspect. So as of right now, I'm sure most people would imagine and think when you hear the word $1 million, you really think of like, man, that's a lot of money. And technically it is a lot of money. But when you're looking forward, as far as that money actually being there and being able to, you actually be able to use those funds in the days ahead for a retirement sake or something of that nature, it won't really be as much as you might think it will be, especially given the environment we're in now. And this has a lot to do with things on this side of the graph here. But more importantly, when it comes to the word $1 million, it's only really in the developed world where we're at now that we actually still value and use that word in a way that still conjure up emotions of excitement that, man, if I could just set aside $1 million, I'll be set, or I'll be good to go for how many every years. But outside of this country, outside of the developed nations, there's already been proven cases where the word million and dollars don't really go hand in hand. And just to give you an example, in a metaphorical sense, I personally became a millionaire a couple years ago, and it was relatively easy, and it didn't take much effort on my part, just because all I had to do was just to go on to eBay, and I actually purchased what is this? This is a $500 million legal tender note issued by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, and they also print up a $10 million Zimbabwe note. And then here I have a 50 million Zimbabwe dollar note. And so here we have an actual legal tender note. It says $50 million. So people in Zimbabwe were millionaires prior to the Great Recession, as well as people in Venezuela right now. They've become millionaires and billionaires. And so if you think about just the word millionaire, it only applies for the most part in the developed world to this current day. But yet, as these people found out after the fact that being a millionaire may not necessarily be a good thing that you want to strive for in terms of, in longevity, due to the fact that $1 million Like this note, for example, is expired. It's good for nothing. And so millions of people had to find out the hard way that striving to be a millionaire is all fine and well when things are normal, the economies, everything is smooth sailing. That's fine. But as we've all seen, as they've noticed, as other countries around us have all noticed, that when monetary and fiscal policy collide, $50 million, as this note here, is probably worth a penny. And so this is a primary example of what the millionaire mindset can be deceiving, especially as we see here from outside this country. And this is just 10 years ago, give or take. But this is an actual legal note issued to people, and they had in their bank account. But yet everyone who's holding these pieces of paper, for the most part, lost everything that was denominated in this $50 million note. So this goes back to what I'm going to talk about with this visual aid right here. And it's going to be sweet and simple because, as I mentioned, I can't get through everything in a short amount of time. But here we are in the Western world now. There's a big push for everyone to set aside and save for their retirement. And just a thought, a ballpark figure, just say $1 million will be enough for you to live comfortably, not to mention, where you're going to put this $1 million and what assets or whatever. I'm talking about just $1 million net capital in hand, the retirement nest egg that everyone says you have to have in order to put it aside and let it grow with compound inflation. And we're going to get on something about compounding pretty soon. But to give you an idea of how I arrived at this number and how going back, the whole idea of reaching $1 million has become somewhat of a inspired goal to shoot for, but yet it would be so far-fetched considered to our prior ancestors, like my grandparents or your grandparents, and especially your great-grandparents couldn't have ever even fathomed of accumulating $1 million or the need to actually have $1 million to live comfortably upon in their day and age, whenever that might have been. So basically, just to come up with this number here and to go back and show you how it's just a relative number that may not be worth much to you pretty much in the next couple years, especially decade or so, as we see the trajectory of the current purchasing power of the dollar here. And so if everyone knows from the Federal Reserve, or for those that may not know, the Federal Reserve Bank came into existence in 1913. And since then, this is a primary example of what monetary policy has done to just the overall purchasing power of a single dollar. So automatically right there, the dollar has changed due to monetary policy in this direction. And along with that, fiscal policy, the lines underneath, are also going in the opposite direction. And so, give you an idea, the blue is the current money supply of our country right now, which is about 3.7 trillion. So 3.7 trillion pieces of paper are floating around, give or take some digits or whatever, in existence. And then as far as our national debt, people don't realize how the national debt is a reflection of partially the currency in circulation. So as you see, over the last 100 plus years, there's been an incremental spike, borderline steep increase in our monetary base as well as our debt. That's not by coincidence. And it all has to do with the idea that this has been going down while this has been going up. But for another video, I'll talk about the inflection point where, basically where ground zero took place for this happened right around this time frame right here. And if you're aware of monetary policy, you know what I'm referring to right up in there. But I'll get to that in a later video. But just to get back to the point, $1 million here. So if you reverse engineer what your grandparents or what your great-grandparents would have needed the equivalent of to enjoy a mental cushion, not necessarily, we're talking about purchasing power yet. We ain't got there yet. I'm talking about a mental cushion of looking ahead at a number that you can say, man, that number is going to be there. It's going to grow. I'm going to retire comfortably and live happily ever after type of thought. So if you take $1 million, you put into the calculator, the inflation calculator, and to give you a chance to do that, you can play around with that. Just go to rethinkingthedollar.com and scroll to the very bottom. It's called Dollar Power. And you type in $1 million and you can play with some numbers yourself and come up with your own figures. But put $1 million in and then you go backwards. I use increments of what I use here. I use 20 years increments because average lifespan after retirement, give or take health could be 20 years or so. So you know kind of what you're working with. But you go $1 million here. And so if you reverse engineer that and say, okay, what would the equivalent be of $1 million 20 years ago as a lofty goal to shoot for if you were trying to shoot for $1 million now? And so if you go back to just 1993, as you can see here, $619,000.246 would be the equivalent of a desired amount of money to set aside to factor in wherever you want it to grow and all that stuff like that. But that would have been a number that probably would have been suggested that something that would have been a lofty goal. Of course, depending on your income and things of that nature, it varies for everybody. But if $1,000,000 was your lofty goal today, it would have been the equivalent of $619,000 20 years ago. And so along with that, we see how there's been a steep drop off in purchasing power. And so I will touch on that in a minute. The next one here, if you were to go back to 1973, I wasn't born yet, but yet my mom and father and dad, they were all young, give or take, but their parents at that time entering a retirement age, what would have been a lofty goal for them, the equivalent of what we look for today as a form of $1,000,000, would have been $184,000, give or take, to set aside as a lofty goal to retire comfortably, give or take how they invested it. So as you can see, as you go further down back to the origin and the creation of our current Federal Reserve banking system, we see that the number goes down. And that's not by coincidence, because as you can see here, as it goes down, the dollar or the purchasing power of each note is of more value. And so just to go back to the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913, where an hourly income was 33 cents on average. So that means per hour people went to work, they received 33 cents per hour, which would equate to, say, how many is that? So say $2.40 a day times 7 is $14 a week times a month, say 30. So you get the point. But as far as what they were actually able to acquire during that time was a lot more than what we, fast forward to this current moment, can actually acquire for a single $1,000,000. Because I'm pretty confident that if I say $1,000,000, what can you do with $1,000,000? Can you spend that in an hour? Can you spend that in a day? I'm sure you can probably spend that in 30 seconds on your phone, because of the idea that as you look here, it doesn't have much value as far as what it can purchase. So it's only working on roughly 2 cent, 3 cent, give or take. And in future videos, I'm going to talk about what happens when this thing goes sub-zero, which I believe we're not far away from. But just to go back to the origin of our central bank here, when the dollar was actually worth $1 prior to the Federal Reserve note becoming our monetary currency of value. And so during that time frame there, you didn't have to make money. As you can see here, the overall debt and the notes in circulation was minimum. So there was not much competition in the form of notes to compete against each other, which basically kept prices semi-stable for a very long time. And so that's a primary example of monetary policy and fiscal policy beginning to take effect, which led to this massive inversion here of one going down and one going up. But it's not by coincidence. And so just to give you an idea that $1,000,000 is not what it used to be, because if we were to go back and say 1973, if your great-grandparents had a lofty goal of $1,000,000 or were in that type of echelon of income, then that $1,000,000 would have lasted them a very long time in a comfortable manner. But at this current moment, $1,000,000 is just a tip of the iceberg for what would be needed to even begin thinking about living comfortable in the days ahead. Factor in all the things happening now, and more importantly, as we continue to have this steep decline here, which eventually has to come to an end, because as you see here, once it gets to zero or around that ballpark, the question will be then what? Then what would this number have to be? And that's where I believe we're going to get into some things later on. But I just want to put something before you guys real briefly, real short, and just scan the surface of the very first line. And I'm thinking about the idea that $1,000,000, as people around the world they've already found out, and they're going to find out even more in the days ahead, that the number 1 million and the words million, M-I-L-L-I-O-N, and especially with the word dollars, as we see here, it's just a number, and it's just a word, or letters rather, if it doesn't have anything behind it of substance. And as you can see right here, if this was $1,000,000, so I'm gonna leave you with this thought: $1,000,000 adjusted for inflation in that same calculator I'm referring to, that you can find at rethinkingthedollar.com. If you go to that calculator there and you type in $1,000,000, and if you were to go back to 1913 and adjusted for inflation, the amount of purchasing power a million would have had back then, it would equate roughly to $23 million of actual purchasing power that would have been available to that person back then in comparison to what's available now, give or take. So that being the case, just wanted to shine some light on this whole $1 million aspect of an ideal number worth shooting for. And so throughout history, as you can tell, when financial and monetary policy collide here, it changes the game, and it's already changed the game drastically, as you can see here, because I'm pretty sure you can spend $1 million in 30 seconds. But if you go back to 1913, where the average, say, $1 million equivalent was $42,000, and the people during that time frame on average was making $600 a year, it would take those people a lot longer to spend $42,000 of their retirement nest egg had they had that in their actual possession and was required to do so because of cost of living. This is also as a reflection of the cost of living having gone up. And so think about it. If you go back this far here, during this time frame here, a car, you can buy an automobile for $400 or $500, a good one. You can buy a house for $1,000. You could have done a lot more because there was more purchasing power in an actual dollar in comparison to what we have now. So with that being the case, definitely if you guys find this informative, share this with your family and friends, because to my knowledge, you're not going to see any visual aid put together in this manner that's very concise and explains itself on just using the numbers, a million, to let people know that it's not really going to be something of substance in the years ahead, because as this thing drops here, there's going to be some problems where this number here, unfortunately, possibly may run the risk of looking like something like a 500 million or something of this nature. So other than that, leave a comment down below. Definitely share this and definitely come back, because I'm going to go to the next layer pretty soon. And then to wrap all this up at the end of everything, I have in mind another visual aid of some things I'm going to put together, which will show you something that can be somewhat of a possible solution or answer. So I don't want to leave you guys just with all the facts of what actually is happening now and what's going to happen, but yet I also want to give you guys some solutions and strategies as well. So that being the case, definitely leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share this with your family, friends. If you find it important, definitely go to the bottom of this video and download this. Look at this, dissect this, prove it wrong. Definitely, if I have anything wrong here, let me know. No harm, no foul. Other than that, stay tuned for this next one. Make sure you subscribe and get this word out, man. This is important. I think this is something everybody should see. Other than that, I'll see you guys later.